I'm Alex, I'm 28, and my own family tried to ruin my life over a lie, kicking me out of the house they couldn't afford without me. Before I tell you how I uncovered the truth and took back everything they tried to hide from me, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's good to know you're out there. It all blew up at my younger brother Jason's 22nd birthday party. This wasn't some backyard barbecue with cheap beer and hot dogs. This was a full-blown production, a testament to the image my parents, Richard and Diana, were desperate to maintain. They had rented out a private dining room at the Gilded Spoon, one of those painfully trendy brunch spots where the waiters look down on you if your watch costs less than a used car. The mimosas were $20 a glass, served with a single artisanal raspberry floating in the center. I knew this because I was the one who would ultimately be paying the bill. I was the silent financier of the perfect Mitchell family illusion, a role I had played for 4 long years. The air in the room was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the sound of forced, brittle laughter. My Uncle Thomas, my dad's wealthier, more successful brother, was holding court at the head of the table. He was booming, clapping Jason on the back, and loudly proclaiming his nephew was destined for the corner office. It was a familiar scene, a ritual as predictable as Thanksgiving. Jason was the golden child, the charming prodigy. I was just Alex, the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who made sure the bills were paid so celebrations like this could happen. I was standing by the bar, trying to get a simple glass of water, when I overheard them, Jason and his girlfriend, Vanessa. She was a social media influencer whose entire personality seemed to be curated from Instagram trends. They were huddled close, whispering. "The plan is absolutely set," Jason murmured, a smug curl to his lip. Vanessa giggled, a high, tinkling sound. "Oh, it's going to be epic. He'll never see it coming." I told myself it was nothing, probably some elaborate TikTok they were planning, or a surprise trip. I had bigger things on my mind, like the quarterly earnings reports I had to finalize for my senior financial analyst position come Monday. I dismissed their words and focused on the bland conversation my aunt was trying to have with me about the stock market. Then came the moment that would shatter my life. Jason stood up, raising his champagne flute. The room fell silent, expecting a heartfelt thank you. Instead, he put on a performance worthy of an Oscar. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate with me," he began, his voice already thick with manufactured emotion. "It means the world, but I have to share something terrible." He paused, letting the drama hang in the air. "My grandfather's watch. The vintage Rolex he gave me right before he died. It's been stolen." A wave of shocked gasps rippled through the room. My Aunt Patricia, a woman who lived for drama, clutched her pearls as if she'd just witnessed a murder. Jason's eyes, cold and hard as chips of ice, locked onto mine from across the room. "I looked everywhere for it for weeks," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that everyone could hear. "And then, I found it." He took a shaky breath. "Hidden deep in a drawer in Alex's room." Time stopped. The clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversations. It all ceased. Every single person at that table, my aunts, my uncles, my parents' closest friends, turned to stare at me. The silence was a physical weight, pressing down on me, stealing the air from my lungs. My mother, Diana, was the first to speak, her voice a sharp, poisoned dart. "Always so jealous of your brother," she spat, not even looking at me, but at the sympathetic faces of her friends. My father, Richard, the man who taught me how to ride a bike and balance a checkbook, simply stared down at his perfectly folded napkin, refusing to meet my gaze. His silence was the cruelest blow of all. It was a verdict. Guilty. My cousin Emily, who was more like a sister to me, started to protest. "That's impossible, Aunt Diana. Alex would never." "That's enough, Emily," my Uncle Thomas interrupted, his voice a stern command that silenced her immediately. Later that night, the performance was over. My father stood in the hallway, his face a cold, emotionless mask. "Get out," he said. It wasn't a shout. It was a flat, dead command. "Pack one bag. I want you gone in an hour." My mother stood beside him, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of disappointment and disgust. I was a stain they needed to remove. As I walked past them to my room, the room in the house I was paying the mortgage on, I knew this wasn't just an argument. This was an excommunication. And as the full weight of their betrayal crashed down on me, a tiny, cold spark ignited in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't pain. It wasn't grief. It was the first flicker of a fire they would come to regret starting. The sound of the front door clicking shut behind me was unervingly quiet, a soft punctuation mark at the end of a 28-year-long sentence. I stood on the driveway for a long moment, the single duffel bag at my feet feeling impossibly heavy. The familiar suburban street, with its identical houses and perfectly manicured lawns, looked like a movie set. A life I used to belong to, now just a backdrop. I forced myself not to look back at the house, not to search for a face in the window. I knew what I would see, or rather what I wouldn't see. No remorse, no doubt, just the cold certainty of my guilt in their eyes. I got in my car, a sensible 4-door sedan that screamed, "Financial analyst," and drove. My mind was a blizzard of questions and accusations, but my hands were steady on the wheel. I drove through the sleeping suburbs, past the parks where I played as a kid and the high school where I graduated with honors. Every landmark was a ghost. There was only one place I could go, one person who wouldn't demand an explanation I didn't have. I pulled up to a modest, 3-story apartment building on the other side of town, a world away from the manicured lawns and 2-car garages of my old life. I walked up to apartment 2B and knocked. The door opened to reveal my best friend, Mark. We'd known each other since college, where we'd bonded over late-night study sessions and cheap pizza. He was a graphic designer, a stark contrast to my world of numbers, but he was the most logical, level-headed person I knew. He took one look at my pale face, the duffel bag clutched in my hand, and his expression shifted from sleepy confusion to serious concern. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask why I was there at midnight. He just stepped aside. "Guest room's open," he said, his voice a low, comforting rumble. He took the heavy bag from my nerveless fingers. "Bed's made. You look like you could use a beer. Or something stronger." "Stronger?" I managed to croak, my throat tight. He nodded, disappearing into the kitchen. I sank onto his worn-out sofa, the springs groaning in protest. Mark returned with 2 glasses and a bottle of decent whiskey. He poured 2 fingers in each, handed one to me, and sat down in the armchair opposite me. We sat there for a long time. The only sounds the clinking of ice and the distant hum of traffic. He didn't push. He didn't pry. He just provided a silent, unwavering sanctuary. His unspoken trust was the first breath of air in a room where I'd been suffocating. He was my only ally, the first citizen of a new country I was now forced to build for myself. Lying in the dark in Mark's guest room, staring at the unfamiliar patterns the streetlights made on the ceiling, the past wasn't just a memory. It was an exhibit. The evidence of my own folly, laid out piece by painful piece. It all began 4 years ago. I was 24, celebrating a promotion to a senior analyst position at my firm. The salary jump was significant. I felt invincible. I took my parents out to a steakhouse to celebrate. A place they loved but always complained was too expensive. That same week, the phone call came. It was my father. His voice, usually so confident and booming, was a hollow whisper. His company, the one he'd given his entire adult life to, had been bought out. His high-level executive position was eliminated. His severance was decent, but it wouldn't last forever. "Don't tell your mother how bad it is," he begged me, his voice cracking. The shame in his voice was a knife in my gut. The humiliation. It would crush her. So I agreed. And I did more. I knew my father's pride wouldn't let him ask for help directly. So I went around it. I logged into my online banking, found the mortgage company's website, and looked up their payment. $3,800 a month. It was a fortune, but I did the math. I could cover it. I set up a recurring automatic payment from my account to theirs. I told my parents it was a no-interest loan to help them reorganize their finances. It was a lie we all tacitly agreed to believe. The loan was never spoken of again. That was the first thread. Soon there were more. My father tried to start a consulting business. It failed spectacularly. I was the one who quietly paid the credit card bills he'd racked up buying office equipment and taking potential clients to fancy lunches. I classified the $15,000 loss in my head as another loan. Then came Jason's turn. He got accepted into a private university known more for its prestige and parties than its academics. The tuition alone was $45,000 a year. My mother called me, weeping with a mixture of pride and performative despair. "Oh, Alex, it's his dream, but with your father's business not taking off, I don't know how we can possibly do it." The implication was a lead weight. I was the family's walking, talking solution. So I logged into the university's bursar portal and set up a payment plan. My salary was now funding my brother's future, a future he would no doubt use to look down on me. It became a quiet routine. An email from Mom with the subject line, "Oops," and an attached, "Overdue electric bill." A text from Jason, "Dude, the cable's out again. Can you call them? They listen to you." I became the family's concierge, their chief financial officer, their invisible janitor cleaning up all their messes. I paid for Diana's quarterly trips to a high-end salon in the city, the one that cost $400 a visit. I paid the plumber when the pipes burst. I paid the mechanic when the transmission on my father's car failed. I told myself I was being a good son, a responsible brother. But the truth, stripped bare in the sterile quiet of Mark's guest room, was far uglier. I wasn't being dutiful. I was being used. I wasn't a family member. I was a resource to be exploited. My love and my salary were indistinguishable to them. And now that I had been falsely accused, my utility had run out. It was that simple. They weren't just discarding a son. They were firing an employee who had suddenly become inconvenient. Just as I was sinking into a pit of self-recrimination, my phone buzzed with a call from my cousin, Emily. She was 2 years younger than me, but she had a wisdom that belied her age. She had always seen the family dynamics for what they were. "Alex? Oh, thank God you answered." Her voice was shaky, laced with anger. "I just left their house. I can't believe them. I will never forgive them for this." "It's not your fight, Em," I said, my voice hoarse. "The hell it isn't," she shot back, and I could picture her pacing in her room. "They are delusional." I told them, I said, "Alex has been helping you people for years. And your mother had the audacity to say, it's a son's duty to help his parents." I wanted to scream. She took a breath. "Listen to me, Alex. This isn't new. Remember when Jason borrowed Grandpa's car without permission and dented the fender? Who got their allowance docked for 3 months to pay for the repair because you were supposed to be watching him?" I remembered. I'd been at a swim meet that day miles away. Or the time he failed his chemistry midterm and told them the teacher hated him. They called the principal to complain. But when you got a B+ in calculus instead of an A, your dad lectured you for an hour about slacking off. It's always been this way. They need a hero and they need a scapegoat. You just got permanently cast in the wrong role. Her words were like a bracing tonic. She wasn't just offering sympathy. She was offering validation. She was confirming that I wasn't crazy. The injustice I felt wasn't just in my head. It was a pattern of behavior she had witnessed her whole life. "Thank you, Emily," I said, and my voice was stronger. "Seriously, thank you. Whatever you need, Alex. A place to stay, money, a witness, you just call me. I'm on your side. 100%. We hung up, and for the first time I didn't feel completely alone. I had Mark. I had Emily. It wasn't a family, but it was a start. It was a foundation I could build on. Section 2.4, a logical suspicion. Lying there, the words of my mother. A son's duty. Echoing in my ears, my analytical brain began to push through the emotional haze. Something was wrong with the story. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. The accusation was too dramatic, too theatrical. Jason was many things, selfish, arrogant, lazy, but he wasn't stupid. Framing me was a high-risk, low-reward move. The potential for it to backfire was huge. Why would he do it? Just for a moment of cruel satisfaction? It didn't track. Then a colder, more logical thought surfaced. It wasn't about hurting me. It was about protecting himself. Jason was always broke. He craved the lifestyle, the designer clothes, the expensive gadgets, but he had no income. He was completely dependent on the family allowance, which was, in reality, coming from me. But what if he needed a large sum of cash? Something beyond what he could ask for. The Rolex. It was worth at least $12,000. It was the most valuable, portable asset he owned. The theory formed in my mind, cold and sharp as a shard of glass. He hadn't lost the watch. He had sold it. The accusation wasn't an attack. It was a defense. It was a preemptive strike to create a story, a villain, before anyone in the family, namely my parents, started asking where his prized possession had gone. He needed a scapegoat to cover his tracks. It was a monstrous theory, but it was the only one that made perfect logical sense. It fit his character, his motives, his desperation. A new kind of resolve settled over me. This was no longer just about the emotional betrayal. This was a puzzle, a financial crime in a way, and I was a financial analyst. Finding the truth was no longer just about clearing my name. It was about proving my hypothesis. I would dissect this lie, piece by piece, until I had nothing left but the cold, hard, verifiable truth. My family had started a war based on a lie. I was going to end it with the facts. The next morning, the sun cut a sharp rectangle across Mark's kitchen table. I sat with my laptop, a mug of black coffee steaming beside me. The anger from the night before had cooled into a solid, heavy object in my chest. It was time to act. This wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences. It was about rebalancing an equation that had been skewed in their favor for far too long. I opened my web browser. My fingers, usually flying across the keyboard analyzing market data, moved with slow, deliberate precision. Each click was a statement. First, the mortgage. The big one. I navigated to my bank's secure portal. The familiar blue and white interface, a stark backdrop for the task at hand. I found the recurring payments tab. There it was, Mitchell Family Home. $3,800. First of every month. I thought of my father, so proud of that house, lecturing me about the importance of property ownership. I thought of my mother, tending her rose bushes in the front yard. A picture of suburban bliss. It was all a facade, and I was the one paying for the paint. My finger hovered over the delete button. A flicker of guilt, a ghost of old loyalties, tried to stop me. I crushed it. They had judged me, condemned me, and exiled me. My duty was over. I clicked. Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled payment? The pop-up asked. I clicked yes without hesitation. The line item, the biggest financial chain binding me to them, vanished. Next, Jason's future. I logged into the tuition payment portal for his private university. His student ID number was saved in my browser. The next installment on his $45,000 a year education was due in 2 weeks. I navigated to Manage Payment Plans. I could see my bank account information listed as the primary source. I clicked Cancel Plan. A warning flashed on the screen. Cancellation of this payment plan may result in a hold on the student's account and could affect enrollment status. I smiled grimly. Let it. I confirmed the cancellation. Jason was about to get a real-world education in cause and effect. Then came the systematic unraveling of their daily comforts. The family cell phone plan. I was the primary account holder for all 4 lines. I logged in and initiated a transfer of ownership for their 3 numbers. They would now be responsible for their own bills. The request would take 24 hours to process, at which point their service would be suspended until they set up their own payment. The premium cable and gigabit internet package. The one Jason needed for his online gaming and Vanessa needed for her endless streaming. I found the account number on an old email and started an online chat with customer service. 10 minutes later, the service was scheduled for disconnection at the end of the billing cycle. Finally, the small, insidious debts. The credit card my mother used for her little extras. I logged in, saw the balance of a few $100s and paid it off in full. It was the last dollar of my money they would ever see. Then I removed myself as an authorized payer and closed the account. When I was done, I leaned back in my chair and closed the laptop. The apartment was quiet, but in my head, it was deafeningly loud. It was the sound of shackles breaking, the sound of freedom. I had not destroyed anything. I had simply stopped holding it all up. Now I would just wait and watch it fall. The first tremor hit 9 days later. Started, as I expected, with Jason's sphere of influence. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Yo Alex, Jay said to hit you up. The internet is out. He needs it for a school project. Fix it. A school project. The lie was so lazy it was almost insulting. I deleted the message and blocked the number. An hour later, a different number, a different friend. Dude, what's up with the Wi-Fi? Vanessa is having a meltdown. Says she's losing followers. I imagined her panic. Her perfectly curated world cut off from its source of validation. A small, cold part of me enjoyed the image. I blocked that number too. The next day, the first voicemail from my father appeared. His voice was laced with a forced casualness that reeked of anxiety. Alex, it's your father. Just calling to check in. We got a strange automated message from the mortgage company. Something about a payment being overdue. It's obviously a mistake on their end. Some computer glitch. But I figured you could call them and sort it out. You know how incompetent those people can be. Give me a call. A computer glitch. The denial was staggering. He couldn't even conceive of a world where I wasn't quietly handling things. I saved the voicemail. It was Exhibit A. Then Jason himself texted. His usual arrogance replaced by pure fury. My phone is shut off. My phone. What did you do? I have to use Wi-Fi to send this. The irony was beautiful. I typed my one and only reply. I didn't do anything, Jason. I just stopped doing everything. His response was a string of incoherent, misspelled rage. I read it once, savored the panic, and then blocked his number. The tremors were growing stronger. I focused on my work, channeling the turbulent energy into productivity. I stayed late, took on an extra project, and dove into complex market analyses that required all my concentration. My work was clean, precise, and logical. It was the complete opposite of the emotional chaos of my family. My boss, Mr. Landon, a sharp man who missed nothing, commented on it during a team meeting. Alex, your latest projections are spot on. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. I was building a new reputation, one based on my own merit, far away from the titles of son and brother. The fortress of my new life was being built, brick by brick, and the noise from the outside world was beginning to fade. The earthquake hit on day 14. It arrived in the form of my mother, Diana, on Mark's doorstep. I had just gotten home from a long day at work. The banging on the door wasn't a polite knock. It was a frantic, demanding summons. Mark and I exchanged a knowing glance. Showtime, he muttered, pulling out his phone and discreetly hitting the record button from the kitchen. I opened the door. My mother stood there, a portrait of manufactured distress. Her designer coat was immaculate, her hair perfectly coiffed, but her eyes were wide with a desperate, theatrical panic. She swept past me into the apartment, completely ignoring Mark. Alex, thank heavens, I've been calling and calling. I was so worried something had happened to you. She began, her voice trembling. You know why I haven't answered? I said. My voice as flat and hard as I could make it. What do you want, Diana? Her face crumpled on cue. Tears welled in her eyes. It was a performance I had seen 100 times, usually deployed to get what she wanted. What do I want? She whispered, reaching for my arm. I flinched away. I want my family back together. I want you to stop this. This crusade. It's not about us, Alex, it's your father. His health, he has a weak heart, you know that. The stress of all this is killing him. There it was. The classic guilt trip. It wasn't her fault or Jason's or my father's. It was mine. My fault for reacting to their cruelty. My fault for not silently accepting my role as the family scapegoat and ATM. Let me get this straight, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. The stress of his son being falsely accused and thrown out of his home didn't affect his health. But the stress of having to pay his own mortgage? That's the thing that's going to kill him. You're twisting my words, she cried, the tears now flowing freely. We gave you everything. We sacrificed so much for you and your brother. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Sacrificed? What did you sacrifice, Mom? Your sacrifices had a price tag, and my salary was the one paying for it. You didn't sacrifice. You spent, and I paid. That was our arrangement. But the deal is off. Her tears vanished as if on a switch. The soft, wounded mother was gone, replaced by a cold, venomous fury. The real Diana. You are an ungrateful, selfish child. After everything we've done for you, to think you would abandon us over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I shot back, my own anger finally breaking through. You called me a thief in front of our entire family and threw me out on the street. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a choice. And my choices from now on are my own. Now, please get out of my friend's apartment. She stared at me, speechless. The realization that her old tactics, her tears and her guilt, had no power over me anymore was dawning on her face. It was like watching a queen realize her subjects no longer feared her. She turned, her back rigid with indignation, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture on Mark's wall rattled. Mark stopped recording, a low whistle escaping his lips. Dude, that was intense. I leaned against the door, my body trembling with adrenaline. The war was far from over, but I had just won a major battle. I had taken back my power, and now I was going to use it to uncover the truth. The confrontation with my mother was the final confirmation. My theory about Jason selling the watch wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was the only logical explanation. Vindicating myself in a shouting match was one thing, but it wasn't enough. I needed irrefutable proof, a chain of evidence so strong that it would demolish their entire narrative of lies. It was time to stop being the victim and start being the analyst. My mission began with a single data point, the Rolex itself. I knew that years ago, in a fit of organizational fervor, I had scanned and digitized all of our family's important documents, including insurance policies. I told myself it was for emergency preparedness, but now it was for war. I spent an entire evening on my laptop, sifting through years of digital clutter on my cloud drive. Finally, in a folder labeled Household Admin, I found it. Home_insurance_policy_2019 PDF. My breath hitched as I opened the file. I scrolled past the boilerplate legal language to the schedule of valuable personal property. And there it was, under the men's jewelry section. Rolex Oyster Perpetual. Model 116000. My eyes scanned to the right. Serial number. G78B4520. I wrote the number on a fresh sticky note and placed it on the corner of my monitor. It was my holy grail. Now for the hunt. I created a new spreadsheet, my natural habitat. Column A, marketplace name. Column B, URL. Column C, search terms. Column D, notes. I listed every platform I could think of. eBay, Chrono24, the RealReal luxury watch forums, even Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. The task was monumental, like searching for a single grain of sand on every beach in the world. My life fell into a new rhythm. I'd work a full, demanding day at the firm, come home to Mark's apartment, grab a quick dinner, and then open my laptop. My evenings were spent in the digital trenches, cross-referencing listings, zooming in on blurry photos, and meticulously documenting my search. The first few days were a frustrating grind. I found dozens of watches of the same model, but none with the right serial number, or most had no serial number listed at all. Mark would come home from his design studio and find me bleary-eyed, hunched over the screen. Anything? He'd ask. Just a newfound appreciation for how many people are trying to sell ridiculously expensive watches online. I'd reply, rubbing my tired eyes. A week into the search, I had my first false alarm. A listing on eBay from a seller in Ohio. The model was right, the pictures were clear, but the serial number wasn't visible. My heart hammered as I drafted a polite message. Hello, I'm very interested in this timepiece. Could you possibly provide the serial number? I'm trying to find one from a specific production year. Thank you. I waited for 2 agonizing hours before a reply came back. He sent the number. It started with an F. My hopes plummeted. It was a dead end. The frustration was immense. A bitter taste in my mouth. For a moment, I considered giving up. Maybe Jason was smarter than I thought. Maybe he'd sold it for cash in some back alley deal that would be impossible to trace. The doubt started to creep in, whispering that I was wasting my time, that I should just move on. I almost closed the spreadsheet, but then I looked at the sticky note on my monitor. G78B4520. It was a fact. It was truth in a world of lies. I took a deep breath, opened a new tab, and went back to my list. I would not let them win. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday night, nearly 2 weeks into my obsessive search. I was on my last forum for the night, a niche site for vintage watch collectors called Horology Haven. I was about to give up when a new listing, posted just 3 hours earlier, caught my eye. WTS. Vintage Rolex OP11600, great condition. The seller's username was generic, WatchGuy88. My pulse quickened. The pictures were a little grainy, taken with a phone camera, but the watch was unmistakable. I scanned the post and the comments. My eyes landed on a comment from another user. Can you post a clearer shot of the case back? Want to check for polish wear. And below it, a reply from WatchGuy88. Sure, here you go. He had attached a new high-resolution photo. My hands were shaking as I downloaded the image and opened it in a photo viewer. I zoomed in, enhancing the pixels until the image was a mosaic of squares. But the etching was there. Unmistakable. G78B4520. I shot up from my chair, a strangled cry escaping my lips. Mark came running out of his room. What is it?
Hey guys, real quick, I hope you're enjoying the story. Don't forget to subscribe, it would really help the page. Thanks for supporting.
I found it, I whispered, pointing at the screen. I found the goddamn watch. But as the initial wave of adrenaline subsided, my analyst's brain took over again. I looked closer at the photo. The watch was resting on a desk. In the background, partially out of focus, was a poster tacked to the wall. It was a dark, graphic poster for a metal band, Serpent's Kiss. It was a terrible band, but I recognized the poster instantly. It was the same one that adorned the wall of Jason's best friend, Kevin, in every single one of his social media posts. My God, he wasn't just sloppy, he was an idiot. He'd gotten his friend to sell it for him. I had him, but a screenshot wasn't enough. I needed to tie him to the crime with a conversation. I needed to set a trap. I spent the next hour creating a completely new digital identity. A new email account with a bland name, david.peterson78@email.com. A new profile on Horology Haven. My username, SiriusBuyer22. My profile picture was a stock photo of a generic sunset. I crafted my introductory message with the care of a surgeon. 2. WatchGuy88 subject. Question regarding your Rolex OP116000 listing. Hello, I saw your post on the forum. That is a beautiful timepiece, the exact model my father used to own. I'm extremely interested in purchasing it. I was wondering if you could do me a small favor. Could you take a short video of the watch just so I can see the second hand sweeping smoothly? I've had issues with fakes before. Also, I know it's a long shot, but do you have the original box and papers? I'm a serious buyer and prepared to meet your asking price. Thank you for your time. The request was a multi-pronged trap. The video would prove physical possession. The question about the box and papers, which I knew didn't exist for a family heirloom, was designed to elicit a specific kind of lie. I hit send and stared at the screen, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Less than an hour later, a notification popped up. A new message from WatchGuy88. From WatchGuy88 subject. Question regarding your Rolex OP116000 listing. Hey David, thanks for the interest. It's a fantastic watch. Keeps perfect time. No problem on the video, I can get that for you tomorrow. And sorry, no box or papers with this one. It was an inheritance piece. Let me know if you're still in after you see the video. An inheritance piece. The gall, the sheer, breathtaking audacity of the lie. He was using a sentimental excuse to sell the very symbol of his own inheritance. The next afternoon, the video file landed in my inbox. It was 15 seconds long, shaky, and poorly lit, but it was everything I needed. It showed the watch ticking away on the desk, with the corner of the Serpent's Kiss poster visible in the background. Kevin's hand turned it over to show the case back. And for a fleeting moment, I heard a voice in the background, muffled but distinct. Dude, hurry up, Vanessa's calling me back. Jason's voice. I saved the video. I saved the emails. I took pristine, time-stamped screenshots of the entire exchange. I compiled it all into a folder on my desktop and labeled it, The Truth. The hunt was over. The evidence was secured. The trap was ready to be sprung. All that was left was to summon the prey. For 2 full days, the folder labeled The Truth sat on my desktop, a digital powder keg. I resisted the urge to immediately email it to my parents with a triumphant, I told you so. That would be too easy. It would allow them to control the narrative, to come up with new lies in the privacy of their own home. No, this required a performance. A final act in the theater of cruelty they had constructed. It had to be live. It had to be on their stage. With a deep breath that did little to calm the frantic beating of my heart, I picked up my phone and dialed my father's number. The sound of the phone ringing in my ear was like a countdown timer. He answered on the second ring, his voice cautious, wary. Alex. Hi, Dad. I said. I had rehearsed my tone. Not angry, not accusatory. I was aiming for weary, beaten down, and contrite. I think we need to talk. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. Talk about what? He asked, his voice laced with suspicion. About everything, I said, letting a sigh escape my lips. This whole situation, it's gone on long enough. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I paused, letting the bait dangle. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe there's a way we can fix this. I'd like to come over tomorrow night and talk. With you and Mom and Jason. All of us. We need to sort this out as a family. I was offering them exactly what their egos craved. My capitulation. My return as the prodigal son. Ready to beg for forgiveness. There was a long silence on his end. I could hear the muffled sound of his hand covering the receiver as he conferred with my mother. I could make out faint, excited whispers. Says he wants to talk. Fix things? Finally coming to his senses, he came back on the line, his voice transformed. It was now dripping with a thick, syrupy layer of patronizing warmth that made my skin crawl. Of course, son. Of course. Your mother and I would like that very much. We knew you'd do the right thing eventually. We're your family, Alex. We'll always welcome you home. Home. The word was a bitter irony. How about tomorrow night? I said. 7 o'clock? We'll be here, he said, the self-righteous satisfaction practically oozing through the phone. We'll have dinner waiting. I hung up, my hand shaking. The stage was set. The actors had been summoned. I spent the rest of the night meticulously organizing my evidence onto a USB drive. I created a simple, clean presentation. No frills, just the cold, hard facts. The next day at work was an exercise in pure willpower. I sat in meetings, answered emails, and ran financial models, all while a high-frequency current of anticipation thrummed beneath my skin. When I told Mark my plan that evening, he just shook his head in awe. You're really going into the lion's den, huh? I have to, I said, sliding the small USB drive into my pocket. Felt as heavy as a brick. They started this in their living room. I'm going to end it there. Walking up the familiar driveway felt surreal. The rose bushes my mother was so proud of were neatly trimmed. A welcome mat lay in front of the door. It was a perfect picture of domestic tranquility. A complete lie. I rang the doorbell. My mother opened it, her face a carefully composed mask of gentle, forgiving matriarch. Alex, come in, dear. We've been so worried. They were all assembled in the living room, a tribunal ready to pass final judgment. My father sat in his high-backed leather armchair, the throne from which he dispensed his wisdom and disappointment. Jason was slouched on the sofa, scrolling through his phone with an air of profound boredom, as if my presence was an irritating chore. And next to him, to my surprise and delight, was Vanessa, her expression a perfect mirror of Jason's smug indifference. This was better than I could have hoped. A wider audience for the final act. Thank you for seeing me, I said, remaining standing in the center of the room. I was not going to get comfortable. I was not a guest. I was an agent of consequence. We're your family, Alex, my father said, his voice magnanimous. We were just waiting for you to come to your senses and admit what you did. Takes a big man to admit when he's wrong. Does it? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. Because I think it takes an even bigger man to tell the truth. Jason snorted without looking up from his phone. Here we go again. Just apologize so we can move on. And figure out how you're going to pay for my stolen watch. That was it. The perfect opening. You're right, Jason, I said, and every head in the room turned toward me at my agreeable tone. Let's talk about your watch. I calmly walked over to their brand new 65-inch smart TV, the one I knew for a fact they couldn't afford. I pulled the USB drive from my pocket. I've been doing a little research, I said, my back to them as I plugged the drive into a side port. It's what I do for a living. I find patterns in the data. I could feel their collective gaze on my back, a mixture of impatience and condescension. Using the remote, I navigated to the USB input. The screen flickered, then displayed the contents of the drive. A single file named presentation. And the data, in this case, I said, turning to face them, is very, very interesting. I clicked play. The first image filled the screen. A crisp, clear screenshot of the Horology Haven Forum listing. The Rolex, gleaming under a desk lamp. What is this nonsense? My mother demanded, her voice sharp. That, I explained, my voice level and clear, is a for sale listing for a Rolex Oyster Perpetual. Model 116000. It was posted online 2 weeks ago. The asking price was $10,000. I clicked the remote. The next image appeared. A tight close-up of the watch's caseback. The serial number G78B4520 magnified and circled in red. And that is the watch's serial number. Dad, you'll remember when I set up the home insurance policy for you years ago? I insisted we document the serial numbers of all valuables. I pulled that policy. This number is a 100% match. My father's condescending smile faltered. He leaned forward in his chair, squinting at the screen. Jason had stopped slouching. He was sitting bolt upright, his face slowly losing its color. It's a coincidence, my mother stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. It must be. That's what I thought too, I said agreeably, until I looked at the seller's other photos. I clicked again. The next slide showed the photo of the watch on the desk, with the Serpent's Kiss band poster visible in the background. Next to it, I placed a screenshot from Kevin's Instagram page, him in his bedroom with the exact same poster on the wall behind him. The seller is a user named WatchGuy88, but the poster in the background of his photo is identical to the one in the bedroom of your best friend, Kevin. What a funny coincidence, right, Jason? Jason shot to his feet, his face now a mask of pure panic. This is crazy. You faked this. You're a psycho. Am I said, my voice dropping. Then maybe you can explain this. I clicked one last time. The video file began to play. The shaky 15-second clip filled the screen. The watch, the desk, the poster, and then the audio, muffled, but crystal clear in the dead silent room. Dude, hurry up. Vanessa's calling me back. Jason's voice, his words, his crime, playing on a loop in his parents' living room. The silence that followed was a physical thing. It was the sound of a universe collapsing. Vanessa stared at Jason, her perfectly made-up mouth hanging open in a silent O of horror. She looked like she had just seen a monster reveal its true face. My mother was staring at Jason, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with a dawning, sickening understanding. My father looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 seconds. His face was gray, slack, and utterly devastated. Jason stood frozen for a beat. Then he whipped his head towards me, his eyes wild and pleading. Alex, you sold it, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. The question was a statement, a final, damning verdict. You sold Grandpa's watch because you needed cash. And you were too much of a coward to admit it, so you framed me. You let them throw me out. You called me a thief. You destroyed our family. All to cover up your pathetic, greedy little lie. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. He just made a choked, gasping sound and collapsed back onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. A deep, racking sob tore through his body. The sound was ugly, pathetic, and it was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of the truth, finally, clawing its way into the light. In the deafening silence that followed Jason's confession, Vanessa was the first to break the spell. She stood up, her movements stiff and robotic. She picked up her designer handbag, took one last look at the sobbing figure of her boyfriend on the couch, and her expression hardened into a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust. Don't you ever contact me again, she said, her voice a stiletto of ice. She didn't spare a glance for my parents. She just turned and walked out the front door, the decisive click of it closing echoing the finality of a guillotine. One part of Jason's carefully constructed world had just been obliterated. I looked from Jason's pathetic, shaking form to my parents. My mother was now weeping openly. Not the manipulative tears from before, but the ugly, blotchy tears of genuine shock and shame. My father hadn't moved. He was just staring at the blank TV screen, his face ashen. The proud patriarch, the king of his castle, looked like a hollowed-out shell. They had been the architects of my downfall, the judges at my trial, and now they were just two broken people sitting in the wreckage of the world they had built on lies. A strange feeling washed over me. I had expected to feel triumphant, ecstatic, but I didn't. I just felt empty. The fire of my anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, desolate landscape. I had won. I had proven my innocence in the most dramatic way imaginable. But in doing so, the last lingering hope that I had a real family had been extinguished forever. I hadn't just lost the illusion of their love. I had been forced to kill it myself. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the house. I didn't slam the door. I just pulled it closed gently behind me. There was nothing left to say. The drive back to Mark's was a blur. The adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins for 48 hours drained away, leaving me feeling exhausted and hollowed out. I walked into the apartment and Mark was waiting on the couch. "So?" he asked, his voice gentle. "It's done," I said, slumping into the armchair. He confessed. "They know everything. How do you feel?" I thought for a moment. Like I just finished running a marathon I never signed up for. We sat in silence for a while, and I knew my old life was well and truly over. Couldn't go back. But I also couldn't stay here in this limbo. It was time to build something new, something that was mine from the ground up. The first, most practical step was my own independence. I needed my own place. To do that, I needed a mortgage, and to get a mortgage, I needed a flawless financial picture. It was time to do for myself what I did for my clients every day. A full financial audit. I needed to untangle every last thread that connected me to my family's finances, to ensure none of their liabilities could ever touch me again. The following weekend was a deep dive into my own past. I pulled credit reports. I went through years of bank statements. I collected every digital document I had related to my finances. I was looking for loose ends, forgotten co-signed agreements, anything. As I was sifting through a master folder of scanned documents I had created years ago, a subfolder labeled Gram_Source Date caught my attention. My grandmother on my mother's side had passed away when I was 10. I barely remembered her, just a vague impression of a kind woman with a soft smile. Curiosity piqued. I opened the main file. PDF. I started scanning through the dense legal language. Most of it was standard stuff. Her house to my mother and her estranged sister, Rachel, her jewelry to be divided between them. But then, on page 4, a paragraph made my blood run cold. It detailed the establishment of a testamentary trust. It was to be funded with a significant portion of her stock portfolio and was designated for a single beneficiary. My firstborn grandson, to be disbursed to him upon his reaching the age of 25. My firstborn grandson. That was me. I read the paragraph again and then a third time. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A trust fund? I was 28. My 25th birthday had come and gone 3 years ago without a whisper of this. The will named the executor of the estate, the man responsible for ensuring her wishes were carried out, Mr. Robert Harrington, Esq. A frantic Google search confirmed he was still alive. A retired estate lawyer living in a town an hour's drive away. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial his number. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to look down into a chasm of deception far deeper than I could have ever imagined. Mr. Harrington had a kind, grandfatherly voice over the phone. When I explained that I was Rose Mitchell's grandson and had questions about her will, he agreed to see me the following afternoon. His home office was a sanctuary of old-world dignity, filled with the scent of aging paper and lemon polish. He sat behind a large mahogany desk, his kind, intelligent eyes studying me over the top of his reading glasses as I laid out my story. I didn't tell him about Jason or the watch. I simply told him I had recently discovered my grandmother's will and a clause about a trust fund I knew nothing about. I handed him the printed copy. He read the clause and a deep, weary sigh escaped his lips. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. His expression clouded with a deep, professional regret. "I remember this trust distinctly," he said, his voice soft. "Your grandmother was very specific about it. She was worried your parents were, let's say, frivolous with their finances. She wanted to ensure you had a secure start in your adult life, independent of them. I never heard a word about it, Mr. Harrington," I said, my voice tight. "My 25th birthday came and went 3 years ago." He looked me straight in the eye, and I could see a genuine sorrow there. "Alex, as the executor and trustee, I was legally obligated to contact you on your 25th birthday, and I did. Or rather, I contacted your parents to get your current address and contact information, as you were away at college at the time." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "They responded. They told me a rather convincing story." "What kind of story?" I asked, my stomach tightening into a cold knot. "They told me you were having some significant personal problems," he said, the words heavy with apology. "They said you had fallen in with a bad crowd, that you had developed a gambling problem, and were already in a great deal of debt. They claimed that giving you a large lump sum of money at that time would be the worst possible thing for you. They said it would ruin your life. The audacity of it stole my breath. They had painted me as a degenerate to steal my inheritance. They begged me," he continued, "for your own protection, to allow them to continue managing the trust on your behalf, to give you small amounts as needed so you wouldn't squander it all. As trustee, I had a fiduciary duty to act in your best interest. Based on the false information they provided, I made a judgment call. I agreed. I see now that it was a grave error. I was manipulated, and for that, I am profoundly sorry." I felt dizzy, the room tilting slightly. It was so much worse than I thought. This wasn't a recent betrayal. This was a conspiracy that had spanned my entire adult life. "How much?" I whispered. "How much was it?" "Your grandmother initially funded the trust with a stock portfolio valued at $85,000, he said. He turned to his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "After 2 decades of market growth and compounded dividends, and subtracting the management and distribution fees your parents charged the trust for their services." He stopped typing, a grim look on his face. "As of this morning's market close, the current value of the trust is $95,427. $95,000. While I was draining my salary to pay their mortgage, they were sitting on nearly $100,000 of my money. Money my grandmother had left specifically for me." I leaned back in my chair, a single harsh laugh escaping my lips. "They didn't just call me a thief, Mr. Harrington," I said, my voice shaking with a new, arctic rage. "They were the thieves. All along." "Yes, they were," he said, his voice firm. "And their actions constitute a serious breach of fiduciary duty, not to mention outright fraud. Alex, I am coming out of retirement for this one case. We will file the necessary court petitions to have the trust immediately transferred to your sole control. And we will make sure you get back every single penny they siphoned off in fees. I will do it pro bono. It is the least I can do to right a wrong I inadvertently enabled." I walked out of that office into the bright afternoon sun, but I wasn't seeing the world around me. I was seeing my future, a future that was finally truly my own. They had tried to bury me, but they didn't realize they had planted a seed. And with this inheritance, that seed was about to get a whole lot of fertilizer. 1 year later, the man who stared back at me from the reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window was not the same man who had been exiled from his family home a year ago. That man was gone, burned away in a crucible of betrayal and rebuilt from the ashes. I lived on the 25th floor of a sleek, modern high-rise in the heart of the city now. My apartment was my sanctuary, a minimalist space of clean lines, muted colors, and an almost obsessive sense of order. There was no clutter, no ghosts, just a panoramic view of the city skyline, a constant reminder of how far I had come. The $95,000 inheritance was the down payment on this new life, the foundation upon which I started to build. But it was only a start. The real construction came from my own hard work, my own discipline. With the constant draining stress of my family's financial and emotional turmoil gone, my mind became a well-honed machine. At work, my focus was absolute. I was no longer just going through the motions. I was excelling. My market analyses were sharper, my projections more accurate. 3 months ago, my boss, Mr. Landon, had called me into his glass-walled office. He was a no-nonsense man who valued results above all else. Alex, he'd said, getting straight to the point, we're launching a new investment division focused on emerging tech. It's a high-risk, high-reward portfolio. I need someone to lead it who is meticulous, forward-thinking, and unflappable. He slid a folder across the polished desk towards me. This is a vice president position. It comes with a salary that reflects that title and a significant performance bonus structure. The job is yours if you want it. The promotion, the new salary, it was more than just money. It was a validation from a world that operated on logic and merit, a world so far removed from the toxic, irrational swamp of my family. I accepted without hesitation. But the most profound change in my life had come from the most unexpected place. A few months after the confrontation, struggling to process the hurricane of events, I needed an outlet. On a whim, I created a YouTube channel. I called it Money Made Simple with Alex. For my first video, I didn't use a script. I just sat in front of my laptop's camera and told my story. I was raw, unpolished, and brutally honest. I didn't use their names, but I detailed the financial control, the lies, the weight of being the secret provider. I titled it, They Called Me a Thief, but I was paying their bills for years. I posted it late on a Tuesday night, expecting nothing. I woke up on Wednesday to find it had 15,000 views. The comments section was a revelation. Hundreds of people, from all over the country, were sharing their own stories. This is my life. I'm the responsible daughter paying for my parents' bad decisions. Thank you for putting words to what I've been feeling for a decade. My brother is the golden child, and I'm the family bank. I'm crying watching this. I hadn't just posted a video. I had opened a floodgate. I realized I wasn't alone. Far from it. This discovery fueled a new purpose in me. My channel became my passion project. I posted new videos every week. I taught people how to create a freedom fund to escape toxic living situations. I made videos on setting financial boundaries, on how to talk to family about money, on the basics of investing for true independence. My growth wasn't a viral explosion. It was a steady, organic build. Over the year, I reached 150,000 subscribers. They weren't just followers. They were a community. We were all survivors of a particular kind of quiet warfare, and we were helping each other build a lasting peace. I had a strict no-contact rule with my parents and Jason, but updates still found their way to me through Emily, who acted as a reluctant, sorrowful journalist reporting from a fallen kingdom. The foreclosure on the house was finalized 6 months after the confrontation. The bank seized the property that had been the stage for so much of my family's drama and my own silent sacrifice. Emily described a bleak, humiliating estate sale where my mother, a woman who once prided herself on her designer furniture, was forced to sell off her prized possessions for fractions of their worth to strangers haggling over every dollar. Richard and Diana now rented a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in a part of town she used to refer to as the wrong side of the tracks. The manicured lawn was replaced by a cracked concrete patio. The 2-car garage was now a designated spot in a shared, oil-stained parking lot. Richard, the former executive who used to wear tailored suits, now worked a part-time job stocking shelves at a local hardware store. Emily said the booming confidence he once had was gone, replaced by a permanent, defeated slump in his shoulders. Jason's fall was even more precipitous. His public humiliation at the hands of Vanessa, who had crafted a lengthy social media post about being deceived by a manipulative narcissist, had been devastating. His social circle, built on a foundation of his parents' perceived wealth and his own superficial charm, evaporated overnight. He was a pariah in our hometown. The extended family, like Uncle Thomas and Aunt Patricia, who had been so quick to condemn me, were now conspicuously absent from my parents' lives. They wanted nothing to do with the Mitchell family drama. The moment the money and status disappeared, so did they. One evening, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Alex, it's Mom. Can we please find a way to talk? A year ago, that message would have tied my stomach in knots. Now, I just felt a distant, clinical sadness. I had started seeing a therapist, Dr. Keller, a sharp, insightful woman who was helping me navigate the complex aftermath. Following her advice, I didn't reply. I just deleted the message. Some wounds aren't meant to be reopened. My new life was about building healthy connections, not reviving toxic ones. At a financial technology conference where I was invited to speak on a panel, I met Olivia. She was a brilliant marketing strategist who ran her own firm. After the panel, we got to talking. She told me she had started her company with the money she'd saved to escape her own financially controlling family. The recognition was instant. She didn't just understand my story on an intellectual level. She had lived her own version of it. Our connection was immediate and electric. We started collaborating on a series of workshops for my YouTube community, combining my financial expertise with her marketing savvy. Our business partnership quickly blossomed into something more. With Olivia, there were no mind games, no hidden agendas. There was just respect, admiration, and an easy, supportive love I never knew was possible. She was my partner in every sense of the word. The final, strangest piece of news came, as always, from Emily. She had run into Jason at a coffee shop near the local community college. He was working behind the counter, taking orders. He looked thinner, she said, and the arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a quiet, nervous energy. He told her he was enrolled in the paralegal studies program. He was paying for it himself with his wages from the coffee shop. He had apologized to her, his eyes full of what looked like genuine shame for how he had treated me. It wasn't a happy ending for him. It wasn't redemption. It was just a consequence. A man-child finally forced to grow up, one cup of coffee and one textbook at a time. And for some reason, that felt more real and more satisfying than any apology he could have ever given me. The ballroom of the downtown hotel was buzzing. The sign outside read, Financial Freedom Summit Keynote Address by Alex Mitchell. A year ago, I was the subject of whispers and false accusations. Now I was the headline. I stood backstage, looking through a crack in the curtain at the 500 people finding their seats. They were all ages, all backgrounds, all united by a desire to take control of their lives. I walked onto the stage to a wave of warm applause. The bright lights were hot, but I felt calm. This was my new element. I spoke for 45 minutes. I shared charts and data. I talked about investment diversification and tax-advantaged retirement accounts. But that wasn't the core of my message. The core was about what money really is, a tool. A tool for security, a tool for freedom, and most importantly, a tool for setting boundaries. Financial independence isn't about buying a Lamborghini, I told the crowd, my voice ringing with a conviction born of experience. It's about having the power to walk away from a toxic job. It's about having the resources to leave a relationship that is draining you. It's about being able to say no to people who believe your resources, your time, and your life belong to them. True wealth is the ability to choose yourself. I ended my speech by telling them a condensed, anonymous version of my story. I spoke of the secret mortgage payments, the stolen inheritance, the painful but necessary act of cutting ties. I could see people in the audience nodding along, their eyes shining with recognition. Some were crying softly. I wasn't just a speaker. I was their reflection. The applause at the end was thunderous, a roar of validation and shared understanding. As the crowd began to disperse, I stood at the podium, gathering my notes, my heart full. My gaze drifted towards the back of the massive hall. Most people were heading for the exits, but one person remained seated in the dim light of the last row, a solitary figure in a sea of empty chairs. Even from this distance, I knew who it was. The slumped shoulders, the graying hair, the cheap suit that didn't quite fit right. It was my father. He wasn't moving. He was just sitting there, watching me. He looked small, old, and profoundly sad. He was a ghost at a feast he wasn't invited to. Our eyes met across the cavernous room. I saw a universe of regret, shame, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of pride in his gaze. He looked like he wanted to say something, to make some gesture, but he was paralyzed by the chasm between us. A chasm he had dug with his own hands. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I didn't offer any sign of forgiveness. But I didn't look away with anger either. I simply held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a single, slow, deliberate nod. It wasn't an invitation. It was an acknowledgement, an ending. Then I turned, picked up my water bottle, and walked off the stage into my new life. Walking away from the stage, away from the ghost in the back row, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. My story hadn't been a quest for revenge. It had been a reclamation project. I had reclaimed my name, my money, and my future. I learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones holding you back, and the bravest thing you can do is let them go. They tried to bury me in their lies, but they didn't realize they were planting a seed. They never expected me to grow. Thank you all for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between your family and your own well-being? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.